Welcome to the 11th presentation in our series on action learning. We're very pleased that you are joining us. This presentation is about capturing and spreading the learning in action learning. I'm Carter McNamara of Authenticity Consulting. We're providing this series to make action learning even more available and more accessible to everyone. This presentation is one in a series and they are best viewed in order, so please be sure to visit the website listed below for more information on the complete series as well as more information about our company. And so now, let's get started. Action learning is all about taking actions and learning at the same time, so this is a very important topic in action learning. In this series, we've covered the action learning process as well as the elements of projects, membership in groups, facilitation, coaching, and actions. We'll review the last element, learning, in this presentation. A good place to start is to describe what learning actually is and how it's produced from the process. There are certain practices or structures that should occur in programs to ensure high-quality learning, but that learning should be spread across the organization for each of its members. We'll share ideas how that can occur. Learning is in the form of new insights from continuously reflecting on questions shared in ongoing meetings and from continually reflecting on the actions between the meetings. Remember the coaching examples in earlier presentations where people got coached on problems in time management? We talked about those in the presentation about the action learning process and in the presentation about coaching for actions and learning. Let's look at the cycle of continuous learning in that case. Remember they started by talking about that they have this issue, this problem, this time management, and then they got questions that helped them to clarify, well, what is your perception about this situation? Further questions helped them to examine what assumptions and beliefs do you have? How did you conclude that? Are you sure? Other questions helped them to see things differently. They realized, I better not take a course. Heck, maybe I just don't want to delegate. Ultimately, they identified actions that were useful. So in the action learning process, it's primarily one not of hearing new knowledge, taking a course and getting grades. It's understanding yourself and your perceptions, and it's doing something, and then learning at the same time. Learning also is in the form of new skills and new capabilities, because the new perceptions, they're implemented. They're implemented as actions between meetings. All that practice, you learn something in the form of new skills and new capabilities. So let's look at some examples that aren't good ones for learning. I'll talk to my boss. Well, that's not learning. That's an action. Or an answer, I guess I'm that type of person after all. Well, what type of person? Or, I know now, I will do a plan. Well, that's still an action. Good for you, you're doing a plan. What are you learning from it? Sometimes people will say, this meeting was really helpful. Thank you. Well, a member should report about himself, not about the quality of the meeting. Or, this process really works for me. Yeah, well, what about it works for you? How does it work for you? So if members hear another member say anything like these examples, it's useful for the others to come back and say, well, what, where, when, how, what are you learning from this? Here's some good examples of learning. I don't like to delegate because I don't readily trust the ability of others. That's a good point. Or, so we don't need a new plan. Let's implement the plans we already have. Or, I'm pretty good at this listening thing. Here's an example from a group we did. So, the solution is Six Sigma, not total quality management. I like this one. I take an organic approach to problem solving after all. This linear stuff, it just doesn't meet my nature or my needs. Some new programs even adopt a certain theory of learning that depicts the phases in which members learn. For example, they might adopt a Revens theory or a Kolb's theory or a Mumford's theory, or they might come up with their own. Some new programs might expect members to learn certain competencies or abilities that members must learn in the program, and for example, the ability to develop a new leadership program or to lead a group of people to undertake a certain venture. Competencies must be based on certain best practices in the field or on suggestions from various experts. Some programs might use various assessments to compare a person's current abilities against those that are desired. And then they use that to specify the learning that the person needs to gain in the action learning program. We're learning that people often have highly individualized learning styles, and that they learn best when a program matches that style. The action learning process should be customized to accommodate the styles of learners in the group, especially to the learner who's currently being coached. Some programs use learning agreements or contracts that specify the new knowledge, skills, and abilities that members should aim to accomplish in the program. Many of us already know a great deal that is highly intuitive to us. That is, we sense how to deal with certain situations. Now, learning is best made conscious. That is, it should be noticed and affirmed somehow in one's mind. One of the best ways to do that is to mention that learning and even write it down. But we should continue to apply that learning in future applications, or we might forget it. Action learning programs hope to spread learning around in life and in work. In meetings, members might use various tools or forms, not just to talk about learning, but to document it. In between meetings, they take actions they've learned. We've talked about that. But also, they should reference wherever they've written down learnings from other programs and from this one. Those writings can become a precious diary of what they've learned in their life and in their work as well. That's one of the advantages of action learning. Members should be challenged to spread their learning during and after the program. Expectations for that should be set early in the program, so members are continually thinking about how they can apply new learnings elsewhere. An increasingly common application of action learning is to cultivate what's called learning organizations. A learning organization is like a continuously learning individual. Members of the organization are continuously thinking and talking about what has worked, what could be better, and how it could be improved. They're spreading the good ideas around, and they're noticing whether those ideas are working or not. A movement associated with this learning organization is called knowledge management, which often uses various computer systems to capture, organize, and disseminate useful information. Supervisors of the group members should regularly ask the members, what are you learning in the program? How can we use it in our workplace? Another way to spread learning is to do action learning elsewhere in life and work too. Members of groups usually learn a great deal about the process, and so they might start groups elsewhere themselves. This is called cascading the groups. Another way is to start a multi-project program. These programs are where each member of the group brings his or her priority to work on, and that type of program can often involve more people and sometimes stronger participation because each person's getting to work on what he thinks is important. Another way is to use parts of a program. For example, do one group session, but you don't have to have lots of meetings. So say an employee could help another by asking useful questions to explore a current situation. What can they do about it? Are they going to do it? Well, let's get together in a few days and talk about what you've learned. Thank you for viewing this presentation. We hope you'll go on to the next one. You might benefit from the following resources to add even more detail to our overviews of action learning. The website Action Learning Central references an extensive amount of free resources, including about the action learning process, each of its key elements, examples of action learning programs, and tools for each aspect of action learning. There's even an action learning glossary with definitions for each of the common terms in action learning. Our company, Authenticity Consulting, also is available to answer your questions or to help you in any other way. Our firm does very successful action learning groups around the world and for a wide variety of outcomes and applications. There's also the free management library at managementhelp.org. You can find resources and tools for almost any activity in the workplace, including for many of the activities in action learning. You can find more about each of these three resources by going to actionlearningcentral.com/gratis and select the presentation entitled General Resources for Action Learning. Thank you.